So the year was 1967, not long ago. Well, I was living it up then. I had hair down to here and mutton chop sideburns. And I won't tell you what I was doing, but it was very light exercise. And they discovered that men also had a problem that women have. Women call it menopause. They named the male version andropause. Now, the problem is that seemingly men and even doctors don't know this. So about 3 years ago, I started to ask a lot of my colleagues in healthcare globally how much they knew about this menopausal problem that we men endure. Practically nobody, less than 10% of people did. Because we used to spend, listen to this, the overwhelming vast majority of money up until 20 years ago on studying male disease. And that meant that women disease was being studied less than 20%. But what it also indicates is the arrogance of we males, that we literally care more about ourselves than we do our women, than we do our daughters, than we do our coworkers, our lovers, and our friends. And the fact is, we didn't want to admit, as you're going to see in this presentation, that we had a fallibility too. Only ladies, listen. We start this fallibility at 25. You start in your 40s. We're going to explain how this has changed the societies that we live in, the culture that we relish, and the very future of humanity depends upon what we're going to speak about today. So this is not a small subject about a disorder that none of you knew about. This is about how we're going to correct this so we don't have crazy men controlling everything. And we started to, in fact, recognize that that may create a whole new industry. Now, the wealthy often pump human growth hormones into your body, thinking that you're going to be sexier. Hasn't worked yet on many of you. So here's the difficulty we have with we men, that we have this idea that we're infallible. Now, not many of you do this, but you should be doing it because the overwhelming evidence shows that if you keep muscles throughout life, both boy and girl, that literally they produce hormones and your youthfulness maintains much more than injecting human growth hormones in. And if we have muscle, which we used to think incorrectly up till 40 years ago, at an older age, 60, 70, 80, 90, and beyond, it literally allows your brain to work better, your heart to work better, and most important, libido. Let's all say it together in New York. Libido. That's going to be the new song. Our culture has created this machivo man image. And when we're 19, boy, do we have that fertility. We walk along the road with our chest out. Remember Saturday Night Live? Boom, ba-dum, boom. The chains, the whole bit. And we are at our sexual peak. Boys, men are at our sexual peak at 19. At that point, when I saw a tree that was bent, I'd stop the car. They say we thought every 7 seconds. I don't think I ever stopped thinking about it at that point. But at 25, what happens? We fall off a cliff. Most visibly, we age rapidly. People today look much older than they used to when I began my work 50 years ago as of 3 weeks ago. This is my 50th year, 1970. I began working a bit and studying a lot in this field. 1975, joined the team of Hippocrates. We were then in Boston. And moved the institute in 1987 down to Florida. We finally figured out that the North wasn't a nice place to be. It was cold, it was rainy, it was cloudy, and it was consistent. You lived for the summer. Oh my God, June's going to come. And June was cold and cloudy and rainy. And then July and August burned you. And by September, boom, just like 25-year-old men off the cliff. So we've got to start educating people. So the book I wrote is really for you, the public worldwide, but it's written in a way, I have a whole lot of chunky science in the back. So the eggheads, as I call them, who really love to endow themselves with other people's research, they can read it and learn about this subject, which is powerfully important stuff. Because it's breaking up marriages. As I mentioned about 3 minutes ago, the leaders in the world are having this menopause, and I would actually render to believe most of them have it very deeply and very severely. And their chests are out, and they're barking and yelling and creating wars, not with their children, with you, and literally sabotaging humanity's future from this one. And women are watching this and thinking it's their fault. Must be me that did it. This was the very reason we wrote this book. Why does this matter? Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands because I'm sure every one of you would raise your hand that has a partner. But in most relationships, overwhelmingly, there's discord. How many of you recognize when you ask the man to join you, to help you, he's reluctant in doing that? Now, if he understood and if he was educated that maybe the fuel wasn't there to give them the same incentive, the same energy, the same vitality and virility that he had 10 years earlier, or 5 years, or 20 years earlier, that could be discussed. But he feels bad about himself, so he closes up like a what? Like a clam. So when men basically are asked how you're doing, we have a stock answer. Good. But your leg's cut off. Good. Your eyeball popped out. Good. We don't talk to other men about it. Women, thank God, have an outlet called friends. And you talk. You talk. Men bark at one another. Are you ready to admit that you have the desire but not the fuel to do it? So what I'm telling you is not a personal opinion. I'm giving you hardcore science. We are absolutely as virile as a man could possibly be at 19, at 25. The light shut off, and it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And every other ad on television worldwide now is erectile dysfunction. Do you have erectile dysfunction? And it used to be men were the ones that were cheating. Thank God women are out there cheating now because they have a husband with erectile dysfunction. And the more we delved into this, we were pleasantly surprised that people are coming back to full virility and full functionality by, number one, changing their lifestyle, dietary habits, exercise habits, and more important, to expeditiously do that with certain sets of herbs, etc. So, how many of you know a guy like this? Everything's bad, everything's negative. This is a glass half what? Empty. It's always empty. Honey, do you want to go on a ride? Nah. Honey, do you want, nah. Remember, men are programmed to say no. No. Women are programmed to say yes. None of that's right, by the way. Both work and personal relationships depend upon us correcting this problem. This is a big problem. We would go as far to say that many of the social and international abnormalities today come from men who are literally what we used to say about women, on the rag. Well, the men are on the rag. But we get away with it because it looks like we're bold and tough when we bark. If women bark, what happens? Oh, they're not ladylike. Maybe they need to bark at us sometimes. Maybe they need to say something's quite wrong. So we go around barking and getting acknowledgement from being good barkers. Now, I won't make you raise your hand, but many men sitting here, their minds start to wander. They don't focus like they used to focus. You say, well, you exercise, and they try, but it's painful. And this all has to do with one hormone. Anyone wants to render what that is? Testosterone. We are lacking testosterone. Now let's go back to the normal state of affairs. Hundreds of years ago, literally, healthy men and women would naturally reduce testosterone, not like a rock coming off a high building, but slowly reduce testosterone. And women would gain testosterone. So nature literally made it so that we men were really in leadership positions in our youth. And as we became mature, the women took the leadership positions in many ways. And I used to think that couldn't be true. And I used to look at old guys like me carrying their wives' purse. I said, I'll never do that. I'm doing it. She has a 200-pound purse. Any of you chiropractors, I'm going to need you at. Because nature and the universe, God says, give the woman a break. You've been barking at them for 30 years. Let up. Let them do a little barking at this point. Isn't that wonderful how it works? Now, when you look at the brain, there's overwhelming data on this now. When you see people who have confusion, foggy brain as we call it, how many of you think you have foggy brain here? It's hormones. Now, for men, it's testosterone, but for women, it's testosterone too. Women have testosterone. You need it. By the way, if women are very sensual, it's because they have lots of testosterone. But you don't need it as much as I need it. A study that was done looking at men from 50 to 91 over a 10-year period, look at cognitive, memory, and look what they found. That their scores and memory scores were lower and lower and lower depending upon how low the testosterone was. Now, does this mean you should go out and immediately take testosterone? In very severe cases, there are bioidentical hormones that I may suggest. Our medical team offers that, but it has to be done specifically. But in most cases, I'm going to tell you to take what I take, red ginseng. Every single study done anywhere in the world consistently now forever shows red ginseng gets the testosterone to come. In my book, Life Force, I speak about how we keep our youthfulness and how we reverse and prevent disease, as we've been doing at Hippocrates for 64 years. It's through, by the way, hormones in plants. You say, oh, you mean there's hormones in plants? Of course. Bioidentical hormones are mostly made out of soy, but every single raw plant in the world has hormones in it that maintain your youthfulness, your sexuality, your libido. Everything is programmed into plants. We humans and medical people, we don't have to invent this. It's invented. That's why we see the virility come back to people who come to Hippocrates. People who were dead in the water at 30 are now prolific sexually at 80 and 90. As are the Asian populations, making love until the day they die well into their 90s quite a bit. But look at their lifestyle compared to your lifestyle. Your idea of vegan diets is no meat and no dairy and no chicken and no turkey, but shit. We're talking about healthy food. You say, well, I don't like that food. You don't like yourself? Don't eat the food. That's it. You think I like this food when I started? I loathe this food when I started eating. I used to gag when I looked at it. I used to yell at it. And once you take it into the body says, ooh, wow. It becomes like a Barry White song. There's not one species on this earth in their natural environment that do not eat a 100% raw food diet. You're the exception. And you want your libido to be good and your brain to be good and your heart to be good, you better get plugged in. You're not plugged in? Don't be whining and complaining. Going to the latest holistic doctor with the latest fad. Oh, is he telling you about the ketogenic diet or the paleo? Whatever book is popular, they tell you about. It was a blood type diet. It was the Atkins diet. Because they don't know. They don't have a core of depth and experience, the clinical work we've done since 1956, where we plug dying people back into the energy source, and they come back to life. And those of us who are aging like all of you, we just don't age like all of you. Not because there's some magic going on, because now we're talking about real biology nobody's ready to talk about. Everyone's into the moderation. It's a little bit. Why they want a little bit is it doesn't offend you and you'll give them money. Do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. We don't really want to make anyone stretch, because if you make them stretch, they won't come back and deposit more money. I want you not only to stretch, I want you to break. I want you to get into little pieces and reassemble yourself and realize that you are this brilliant creature, 2/3 bacteria. Hormones are the way you think. Every thought, every feeling, every emotion you've ever had in your life is hormonal. And to keep that energy going, that plug is plants that are raw. Because once you cook the plant, the hormones are gone. Once you cook the plant, the vitamins are gone. Once you cook the plant, the proteins are disturbed. And most important, the medicine, the phytonutrients, kaput, finito, done. Study after study now globally show us that the men who are murderers and rapists, their hormones are completely whacked. Completely whacked. They have never done a study when they look at the brain, that's important, and sometimes they have certain patterns of brain disturbance, but more importantly, 100% of these guys that are whack jobs literally have hormonal problems. And by the way, some of your concerns may be hormonal problems. A Japanese study relating to job stress showed the more stress you have, the less hormones you have. They looked at boys in this one, but women are the same. By the way, if women are more stressed than we are because we give them more to do. If it wasn't for women in my life, I would have failed years ago. I'm going to tell you now. I figured one thing out. You give a man a job, he may do it or may not. Give a woman a job, she's going to do it. And I'm not just sitting here blowing smoke up your schnauzer. Women are the most powerful part of our species. Women create other human beings. My wife created children. And we think that they're weaker. How many of you boys ever saw a natural childbirth? You walk out of that, all at once I realize, wait a minute. Wait a minute. They're not the weak ones. That happened to me once, I would have died. Whoop! Had a heart attack. The head comes out. Woo! Power. And we suppress the power. We push the power down. So the more stressed you are, the less hormones you have. The less hormones you have, the more confused you are, and the less productive you are as a member of our society. So what's my motive? You just heard it. The less productive you are as a member of our society. The two most stressful jobs in the world, anyone know? The frontline Marines, Green Beret, and doctors in the emergency room. You ever see how they age? By the way, just 2 days ago, another study came out and showed that when you get under a lot of stress, it kills a particular form of enzyme that makes your hair go gray. Brand new study, just came out 48 hours ago. The scariest thing I saw, I was just a kid. I was 6 years old, and one of my good friends, one of my best friends, David, his father was out playing baseball with him, 32-year-old guy, went back to throw the ball, had a coronary and died. And David was so shocked. He was a daddy. He was a real good daddy. He was just out with us playing like he was one of the kids all the time. And we were all shocked. But I didn't register what death was at that point. I thought he'd come back sometime. I was 6 years old. And David, this little blonde boy, his hair turned completely gray in 10 days. We were so shocked because the only thing we could relate to at that tender young age, he looks like our grandparents and the monster movies and all of that. That's what's happening to you. We're in a big monster movie, all of us. Turn on the news today, you get stressed. You're the most relaxed person in the world, just turn on the news for a minute. Drive on the highway. Things you don't even take into the mind and think it's stress. Driving on the highway. I drive 80, 90 miles an hour all the time. I don't think it's stressful. You don't think it is? My poor wife does. Fatigue comes from people having low hormones, no nutrition, and lack of sleep. By the way, doctors die in their 50s commonly. Green Beret, Navy SEALs die in their 50s commonly. And as my good friend Dr. Cooper, the Kenneth Cooper Center down in Texas, showed us a long time ago, in part it's malnutrition. And how he did that study, he looked at gold medalists from the Olympics. That if you'd asked me the day before I read this study, I would have said, other than people on the Hippocrates lifestyle, the strongest women and men in the world are gold medalists from the Olympics. He showed that they were all dying in their 50s, 40s, 50s, 60s. Why? Because they were doing the same amount of exercise they did in their 20s, but without what? Nutrition. So now today, you see meat substitutes. How about getting to the point you don't want to eat the muscle of an animal? You don't need a meat substitute. How about getting to the point where you don't want to suck from the breast of a cow? How about getting to the point where you're woman and man enough to say no to total insanity? Now we're going to give you the biggest food problems. Number one is sugar. By the way, we're going to give you for free my sugar book. One of the most important books I wrote, and certainly if somebody said, what's the number one thing people should give up that's bad? It's sugar. We've done work on that. Now finally the consensus with the legitimate scientific community, there's not too many of them, but legitimate. You're going to hear a lot of people tell you how great fruit is on this stage, et cetera. That's all now passé stuff, passé. But sugar is male hormones' best friends because it gets rid of it. Makes you estrogenic. And women, it makes what? Masculine. And what doesn't have sugar in it? I'll bring you to the best health store here locally and show you that most of the products have sugar in them, or they break into sugar. You may say, I don't eat any sugar. I don't eat any of those products. You eat potatoes, you eat bread, you eat pasta. 20, 30 minutes, you have sugar in you. That's just people who are trying to hide they have a sugar problem. Do you follow? And the number one addiction in the world is sugar. Not heroin, not alcohol, not cocaine, sugar. You say, oh, Brian, you're extreme. You're extreme if you don't know that. Cocaine and heroin are far less addictive than sugar. And how many of you have ever tried to give up all sugars here? The hardest thing I ever did. Gave up meat, boom, loved meat, gave it up. Gave up dairy, boom. Sugar, 35 years. Just rename my sugar. This isn't sugar, this is a half a pound of honey. You rawies, oh, it's agave syrup. That's worse. Worse. The hardest thing in the world. 30 times more addictive than cocaine. I never took cocaine. Thank God I didn't, because I would have gotten fat with that too, I'm sure. But the reality, quite simple, is that's pretty bad. People who took cocaine said to me, look at, one time we wanted to constantly take it. It made us heroic, made us feel like we were super people. What do you think sugar does to you? One of the most interesting articles I ever read in the New York Sunday magazine section was exposing the sugar cartel. Read it. Pull it up. Must be online. These people kill. How many of you know, how many of you black people even know that slavery came from the sugar industry? Half the black friends of mine, they didn't know that. When a handful of arrogant white aristocracy in Europe wanted the substance called sugar, which was hardly eaten, by the way. It was so revered and so expensive, it was exclusive, that they'd eat 1 kilo a year, 2.5 pounds a year, 2.2 pounds a year. They said, well, Europeans can't do this. It's too hard to work. Who are the people that can do it? So they went over and took these innocent Africans. Innocent people. They were so beautiful. Have you ever been to Africa? Most genuinely human people I've ever met. They talk like this, hello. And they mean it. They embrace you, hello. So the most beautiful, that's your ancestors. And they said, oh, just get in our boats here. Oh, wow, we're going to take a boat ride. And they brought them through the Caribbean. They brought them to North Carolina and South Carolina. And they enslaved them so that a handful of white folks could take 1 kilo of sugar a year. Now, one of the things that governments have known ever since the beginning of organized society, which is the beginning of the end of society, the end of culture, is that you divide and you conquer. And why they pour into certain communities cocaine and heroin is to divide and conquer. And they got all of us to take the substance now, called sugar. You are a slave to sugar. So your governments intentionally started to subsidize the sugar industry, and by the way, the average person consumes 120 to 160 pounds of sugar a year. The slave industry came out of it. You're now enslaved. It's karmic, I'm going to tell you right now. And I'm not going to ask you, but you know you have a problem with sugar. And if you could just rename in your sugar, you have a bigger problem. That's like an alcoholic who says, I only drink 1 cup of wine a day, but try to take it away from me. What to embrace? That's a simple thing. Embrace yourself first. Embrace the true you, the unadulterated you, the authentic you, the honest you. That's who you have to embrace first. But fresh foods, let's not make it organic. Fresh and organic and no GMO. Fresh. You think taking a head of lettuce that was growing 6 weeks ago in California, is that healthy for you? Just healthier than fried lettuce. That's it. But it's still, you need stuff growing. In this conference, you have people right outside this door that have the most powerful food on the planet Earth. And you say, oh, I bet a lot of you go out and spend $100, $200 to eat a meal at a crap restaurant. You can't afford $50 a week to feed you and your family, your loved ones, with this food that puts muscle and brain and power and adjusts your hormones into you? Shame on you for being so disrespectful for your life. Quality water. We said it loud and clear today. We'll repeat it. 3 of us today said it. Gabriel, Anna Marie, and I. If you're not drinking distilled water, you're polluting your body. Distilled water is the only water that takes out pharmaceutical drugs and plastics, period. Now, you can pay $7,000, $8,000, $9,000 for a unit that will do the same, but I'm telling you the cheapest way to do it. Distilled water will take out the most deadly thing, not the chloride. It will take that out easy. That's not the deadly thing, not the fluoride. These are not so deadly as the plastics and pharmaceutical drugs. Read my book, Killer Fish. You'll read, I interviewed 3 of the leading oceanographic scientists in the world. They said every drop of water on Earth has plastics and pharmaceuticals. Herbal support. What did I say for boys with testosterone? Red ginseng. Now, if we do that long enough, and if you don't get back to your normal, and we do a test on you, maybe temporarily we'll get a competent physician to give you bioidentical hormones that are plants, but 8 out of 10 of you never need that. You can do it on red ginseng, cleaning up your diet, cleaning up your water. Other than water, there's nothing that puts more deadly chemicals in your body than water. Oh, showers do about the same, by the way. As MIT showed us, a 15-minute shower, through your skin, you get 1.5 liters of water. That's 1.25 quarts. So 15-minute shower. I can't imagine what a bath does, because you're submersing yourself in the water then. So just standing under the water gives me 1.5 liters, about 1.25 quarts. Can you imagine what laying in it for 30 minutes does? Women, by the way, go to cola. Your estrogen levels will go up with go to cola. Sunlight. You say sunlight, vitamin D, only one of the thousands of things that happen with sunlight. We are just scratching the virtual surface of what the sun does. Sun is the #1 way to boost and strengthen your immune system, period. That's why every civilized society until recently used to put people out in the sun. You went to a sanitarium 50 years ago in Europe, they would make you sit in the sun in the middle of winter even. Nothing boosts the immune system. Even food comes in second to the sun. Your mood, I didn't realize till I moved out of the Northeast, because I'm a happy guy, that I had seasonal depression. I moved out of here because, again, as I said early on, in June when it was supposed to be nice, if it wasn't. Then the end of August, everyone got excited because the nippiness. They say, oh, it's getting nippy. I got bummed out because I knew the clouds would roll in. And I finally realized it wasn't the cold, it was the lack of. Because if I go to Colorado where it's 50 below zero, I'm not that unhappy because it's what? So sunlight is powerful for your emotions, your virility, your sexuality, your youthfulness. And most important, you get sexy that way. Weightlifting. It's not good enough to eat plant-based diets. You've got to lift weight. You've got to get muscle. You've got to look like you're substantial. When you have muscle, you speak with authority, live with authority, and act with authority. When you feel weak, act weak, and look weak. That's simple. Get your acts together. Wimpy vegans give us a bad name. Overweight vegans, you blender vegans.
Well, I put 32 mangoes in and a half a cup of coconut, oh, it's organic, and agave syrup. I don't know why I weigh 500 pounds.
I'm telling you now, brother, why you weigh 500 pounds. Aerobic exercise. Do you realize what that does to you? It increases oxygen. There has never been a legitimate study on cancers or heart disease or mental illness that doesn't show if we increase oxygen, you improve those conditions. Period. There's never been one study that didn't say that. But doctors don't tell you to do that because they can't charge you to do aerobic exercise. Testosterone replacement therapy. What did I just say the number one was? Red ginseng. So how many of you know that you have wonderful, right here on the island, but even more so in New York, go down to where the Chinese doctors are. That's where you're going to get for about a third of the price and people who really know what they're doing. So whenever you're in the city or any major city in the world, you go into those and you ask for the finest forms of Chinese ginseng. And by the way, Korean seems to be the one that does the best, the maximum amount.